Today, we're going to dig into an idea that pretty much flips the traditional classroom on its head. It's called problem-based learning, and it's all built on this one simple but really powerful idea. The best way to learn something isn't to just be told the answer, but to actually discover it for yourself.
I mean, just think back to your own school days for a second. Most of the time, you were probably given a bunch of rules and facts first, and then you were tested with problems later, right? But what if you reversed that entire process? What if learning began not with a lecture, but with a real, messy puzzle that you genuinely needed to solve? Well, that single question, that's the whole foundation of problem-based learning.
So here's how we're going to break this all down. First up, we'll get a clear definition of what PBL actually is. Then, we'll look at the case for it, and also get real about its potential pitfalls. After that, we'll see what it looks like in action, and finally, we'll discover why it's not just one single method, but a whole spectrum of different approaches. Okay, let's dive into section 1. What exactly is problem-based learning? At its heart, it's about reversing the traditional way we think about learning. This right here is the core difference. The traditional classroom usually follows what you could call a rule example system. You're given the rule, then you're shown an example. You know, like learning a math formula before you ever try to solve a problem with it. Well, PBL just flips that completely on its head. It's EG rule. You start with the example, a complex, maybe even a real-world problem, and by working through it, you figure out the rule for yourself. And that leads us to the official definition. With PBL, the problem isn't the final exam, it's the starting gun. It's the trigger for the learning. It creates a genuine need to know, and let me tell you, that is a super powerful motivator. The entire learning journey is then built around this desire to solve that initial puzzle. This quote just nails the huge philosophical shift here. Instead of a teacher just pushing information at students, hoping they'll need it someday, PBL trusts the process. It's this belief that by tackling a meaningful problem, students will be motivated to pull the knowledge they need right when they actually need it. And if you want to break it down even more, there's a pretty cool acronym for it: PROBLEM. The P reminds us that problems are what structure everything. To solve them, students use resources to learn on their own. They help create the objectives, and their behavior starts to look like what professionals do in the real world. This all leads to learning that's active and led by the student. And the motivation? Well, that comes from the pure excitement of discovery. It's a whole system that works together. So that's the what. But what about the why? I mean, why go to all the trouble of flipping the classroom? What are the real, tangible benefits of starting with the problem first? Well, the advantages are pretty compelling. PBL is fantastic for developing those skills we're always talking about. You know, critical thinking, teamwork, communication. And because you're applying knowledge as you learn it, it creates a much deeper understanding than just memorizing facts for a test. It basically trains you to be a lifelong learner. Plus, it naturally brings together ideas from different subjects. And honestly, on top of all that, people just say it's more engaging and, yeah, more fun. But of course, no method is a silver bullet. So to give you the full picture, we have to talk about some of the hurdles that can pop up when you try to implement PBL. So one of the biggest criticisms is that if it's not guided well, a student's knowledge can feel kind of scattered. The teacher's role also changes completely, from a lecturer to a facilitator, and that's a whole new skill set. It can also take up a lot of time, and it often leads to that classic student fear. What if I miss something important? Are there gaps in my knowledge? These are totally valid challenges that any good PBL program has to figure out how to solve. Okay, so we've covered the why and the why not, but what does this actually look like in a classroom? How does a group of students go from being handed a problem to actually gaining new knowledge? A really well-known model for this is called the 7-jump process. It kicks off with the group making sure everyone understands the problem. Then they have a big brainstorm session. But here's the crucial part, right in the middle. The group has to figure out what they don't know and then set their own learning goals. After everyone goes off and does some independent study, they come back together, share what they found, and finally, they solve the puzzle. And what this all really drives home is that the entire process, it lives or dies based on the quality of that first problem. It has to be interesting enough to grab you and complex enough to steer you toward the right learning outcomes, all without just giving away the answer. A good problem isn't just a question, it's the engine for the entire learning machine. Okay, so last big idea, and this one is super important. It's really easy to think of PBL as this radical all-or-nothing kind of deal. But that's actually a huge misconception. Just take a look at this. It shows that PBL is really a continuum. Think of it like a slider. All the way on the left, you've got traditional teaching, lecture first, problem last. But as you slide to the right, the problem gets introduced earlier and earlier until you're all the way on the other side with task-based learning, where the entire course is just built around solving one big, real-world problem. Most education actually happens somewhere in the middle.
So what this means is the real question for a teacher isn't, should I switch to PBL? It's more like, where on this spectrum does my course for these students belong? And the answer is going to depend on your goals, your students' experience, and what resources you have. It turns PBL from this rigid set of rules into a really flexible and adaptable philosophy. Which leaves us with this final, critical question for the future of learning. We know that starting with a problem can build incredible motivation and real-world skills. We also know it can be really challenging to do well. So the debate really isn't about if PBL works. It's about finding that perfect, elegant balance between the guide and the puzzle.